Most yoga teachers seem to think they need to fill every moment of class with instructions. That's completely wrong, and it is exhausting to try. In 20 years of teaching, from professional athletes to complete beginners, from corporate boardrooms to college campuses, I've learned that experienced teachers aren't the ones who say the most. They're the ones who've mastered the art of saying just enough to get students safely into and out of poses, plus what's needed to direct their attention during the experience. The rest of the time, they allow for silence. If you're overwhelming your students with too much information, second guessing every word you say, or wondering why your carefully planned cues don't seem to land, this video aims to completely change how you think about verbal instruction in yoga class. I'm Sage Rountree, and I've been teaching yoga for over 2 decades. I'm the author of 13 books, including the Professional Yoga Teacher's Handbook, and I help yoga teachers move beyond rigid sequences or complete improvisation to find a confident middle path. In this deep dive, I'll share what I've learned about clear, effective cueing, not from theory, but from decades in the classroom, training hundreds of teachers and making plenty of my own mistakes along the way. You'll discover why saying less often accomplishes more, how to structure your cues so they actually land, and practical techniques I use every single class. By the end, you'll have a complete framework for confident cueing that serves your students without overwhelming them or you. Here's the thing most new yoga teachers don't understand. You aren't being paid by the word. When I first started teaching, I thought good instruction meant having something insightful to say about every pose, every transition, every breath. I'd spend hours crafting elaborate verbal explanations, worried that silence meant I wasn't earning my paycheck. And I had a background in public radio where dead air is a big no-no, and experience teaching college English where I would talk, and talk some more. But I'll never forget teaching a group of college football players early in my career. I had this beautiful, detailed sequence planned with layers of alignment cues and philosophical insights about yoga and competition. 5 minutes in, I looked out at 30 huge guys with completely blank expressions. My first thought, they hate this, I'm bombing. But here's what I've learned. Those blank expressions weren't boredom, they were concentration. These athletes were processing, working internally, doing exactly what yoga asks us to do. My constant chatter was actually getting in their way. That's when I discovered this fundamental truth. Teaching yoga isn't like delivering the evening news, giving a TED Talk, or doing stand-up comedy. There's no such thing as dead air. When you don't know what to say nothing. The most experienced teachers I know, the ones students flock to, the ones who've been teaching for decades, they are masters at keeping their mouths shut. They know just what to say to get students safely into poses and what to say to direct attention during the experience. The rest of the time, silence. This creates space for students to turn inward, which is what yoga is really about. When you bombard your students with multiple cues at once, you're actually working against how the brain processes information. Think about learning to drive. When you first sat behind the wheel, someone telling you to check your mirrors, signal, look over your shoulder, ease off the brake, gently press the gas, and watch for pedestrians all at once would have sent you into a panic. But put the car in drive, followed by press gently on the gas. That you could handle. The same principle applies in yoga class. When I used to rattle off 5 or 6 alignment cues for Warrior 2, ground through your feet, engage your front thighs, spin your back heel down, lift through the crown of your head, soften your shoulders, and breathe, I'd see that deer in headlights look. Students would freeze trying to process my laundry list instead of actually experiencing the pose. This is why I suggest what I call the 3Q rule, which we'll explore next. But first, understand this. Your students' brains are already working hard just to coordinate movement, balance, and breath. Don't overload them with information they can't possibly integrate all at once. So here's the 3Q rule in action. Give no more than 3 instructions on the first side of any pose. That's it. Here's how this might look in that Warrior 2. First time, step your right foot forward, spin your back heel down, bend your right knee. That's 3 clear actions. Let them find the shape, breathe, stabilize. Then on the second side, since they know the basic setup, you might add warrior 2 on the left. This time, notice how you're distributing weight between your feet. Can you find a bit more grounding through your back leg? See the difference? The first side establishes the foundation, and the second side refines the experience. If your initial 3 cues land well, if students look settled and focused rather than confused, they won't need much direction for the second side. This frees you to be quiet. Maybe add some imagery that connects to your class theme, or simply let them be present with the experience. Here's the key insight. Your students don't know exactly where your sequence is heading. Only you do. They're not thinking, she forgot to mention the shoulder action in Warrior 2. They're trying to follow along, breathe, and stay present. Trust that they're getting what they need. Your students learn in completely different ways, and reading these differences will transform your teaching. Some students thrive on verbal cues alone. Others are visual learners who need to see what you're doing before they can embody it themselves. You'll quickly recognize the visual learners in your class. When you raise your arm to tuck your hair behind your ear, their arms will lift too. These mirror movements actually give you valuable insight into your own unconscious gestures and habits. For poses where balance is key, like tree pose or warrior 3, consider stepping out of the visual student's sightlines when you cue rather than demonstrating. Your movement, even subtle weight shifts, can actually make it harder for them to find stability. Or if you need to stay visible for safety, try dropping into a squat once you've given your demonstration. I also work with students who have hearing challenges, so I've learned to use my hands like a conductor. Let your arms describe the energetics of poses. Raise a finger to indicate an upcoming transition. Point to areas of your body where students might feel the work. This visual language supports everyone, and it frees up your words. You're not trying to fill time with the sound of your voice. Then there are some students who will learn through feeling. They really need to experience resistance, weight, or support to understand a cue. These folks benefit from props, from using the wall, or from gentle physical assists, always with consent and where appropriate. Silence is one of your most powerful teaching tools, but I know it terrifies most new instructors. When I teach teachers, I often suggest this exercise. Give your students 3 clear cues to get into a pose, then stay quiet for a full minute. Of course, this is not going to work in a flow class, but for the second half of class when you're doing longer holds, try it out. When I teach teachers, I often suggest this exercise. When it works in the flow of your class, give your students 3 clear cues to get into a pose, then stay quiet for a full minute. Most teachers can't do it. They'll make it about 15 seconds before they feel compelled to add something, anything to fill the space. But here's what happens in that minute of silence. Students stop looking to you for constant guidance and start tuning into their own experience. They notice their breath, feel where they're holding tension, discover their edge. This internal awareness is the real goal of asana practice. The exception, online teaching, especially live streaming, silence can make students think their connection has frozen. In these cases, you could preface longer holds by saying something like, "We'll be holding this pose for about 3 minutes, and I'll get quiet except for a few check-ins to remind you we're still here together." Then every 30 seconds or so, drop in a simple cue. Notice where you could soften. Stay with your breath, or just, "We're still here." This teaches you to be intentional with every word. In person, embrace those quiet moments. Online, use minimal, purposeful language to maintain connection. Most new teachers need to slow down and speak up. When you're excited or nervous, it's natural to talk too fast and too quietly. Here's a technique I learned during my 6 years as a radio announcer. Try tapping your foot very slowly while you teach. This simple action will naturally regulate your speaking pace. You can't rush your words when your foot is keeping steady, slow time. But be careful not to overcorrect into an artificially slow yoga voice. That breathy, overly melodic tone that doesn't sound like you. There's a big difference between a calm voice and a quiet voice. Speaking too quietly frustrates students who strain to hear you, and speaking in an affected tone distances you from them. Your authentic voice is your greatest asset. If you naturally speak with energy and enthusiasm, don't try to sound like a meditation teacher. If you're more naturally calm and measured, don't try to match someone else's dynamic style. Students are drawn to teachers who sound like themselves, not like they're performing a role. When it comes to volume, here's the test. Can the person in the back corner hear you clearly without straining? If your cues aren't landing, you may need to project more. If students are wincing or seem tense, dial it back. When in doubt, ask. Have a student in the back row agree to point up if you need to be louder and down if you need to be quieter. If figurative language feels natural to you, great, use it. If it doesn't, it's okay to skip it entirely. Personally, I rely heavily on food analogies in my teaching. I use spicy and sweet instead of hard and easy, or I might say simmer instead of hold intensely. This language feels authentic to me, probably because I think about food constantly, but I've seen teachers force flowery metaphors that clearly don't come naturally, and it creates distance rather than connection. When you do use imagery, commit to it fully. Don't say press your palms into the earth when you really mean press into your mat. But if you're going for metaphor, go all the way. Press down as though you're shooting roots deep into the earth, drawing up nourishment for your practice. Go all in. The key is specificity. Instead of reach your arms up, try reach your arms up like you're placing something precious on a high shelf. Instead of twist deeper, try spiral from your core like you're wringing out a wet towel. Specific imagery gives students something concrete to work with. Don't apologize too much for small mistakes in cueing. This draws attention to things your students likely won't even notice. I learned this from reading Julia Child, who famously said about cooking mistakes, "Never apologize. It only makes a bad situation worse by drawing attention to your shortcomings and prompting your guest to think, yes, you're right, this really is an awful meal." A quick whoops, I meant your left leg demonstrates your humanity and gets everyone back on track. But avoid the constant sorry that some teachers fall into. Your students don't know everything you plan to say or do. They're following your lead in the moment. More than once, I have completely forgotten to do a pose in a sequence I'd planned, either entirely or on one side. Not ever has one student mentioned it. They have no idea what I'd missed because they're present with what's actually happening, not with my internal script. Here's something crucial. Perfectionism in your yoga teaching serves no one. Your students need a confident guide, but they don't need a flawless performance. And if you get caught in your own head trying to be perfect, you'll miss out on being present. The art of cueing isn't about having perfect words for every moment. It's about saying just enough to guide your students safely, then creating space for them to have their own experience. Here's your challenge for this week. In your next class, try the 3Q rule. Give 3 clear instructions to get students into a pose, then pause. Count to 10 slowly in your head before you say anything else. Notice how this changes the energy in the room. Notice how it changes your own anxiety or your own need to control the experience. I would love to hear from you in the comments if you've tried something like this, or even just to have you comment with your best guess as to what proportion of class you are spending talking and what proportion of class you're spending in silence. You might even try to hazard a guess and then record your next class and figure out what that ratio truly is. Getting a clear picture of what you're doing will give you a chance to decide whether it's working for you or you'd like to flip that ratio some. If you want to dive much deeper into this approach and learn how cueing fits into the bigger picture of confident teaching, check out my book, The Art of Yoga Sequencing. It explores not just verbal instruction, but how to create balanced, effective classes using my 6-4-2 framework. 6 moves of the spine, 4 lines of the legs, 2 core actions. This framework helps you plan classes that feel both systematic and intuitive, which makes your cueing more confident too. And if you're looking for ongoing community and support, join us in the Zone, my free community for yoga teachers at comfortzoneyoga.com. We have monthly calls where we dive into real teaching challenges, ongoing asynchronous discussions, and a host of resources to help you teach yoga with more confidence and ease. Remember, clarity builds confidence, both in your students and in yourself. And sometimes the most powerful cues are the ones you don't say. The best teachers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who know when to speak and when to let silence do the teaching.